In this presentation, we're going to look at the concept of globalization. This is not an easy idea because it's quite abstract, it's quite vague, but we have to try and pin it down, we have to try and narrow it down into ideas that we can recognize, remember, and understand. So, what is globalization? What does it mean? Well, basically, globalization is a word that refers to the closer integration of national economies. What does this mean? Well, integration means joining together. So, when we say that the world is becoming globalized, we mean that economically, the national economies of the countries of the world are becoming closer together. They're being joined more closely together. And the main way that this is happening is through trade between countries. So, what has caused this closer connection between national economies? What has caused globalization? There have been many factors which have led to the closer integration of national economies through trade. First of all, there are large political changes that have happened in the last 30 years. For example, China and Russia once used to trade only with a few other countries, if at all. In the case of Russia, it was mainly with other countries in the Soviet Union. In the case of China, it was with its near neighbors. But now both China and Russia have opened themselves up to world trade, and this has led to a great increase in the volume and value of trade being done between countries. Another factor is the activities of the World Trade Organization. This factor has also contributed greatly to globalization. The World Trade Organization is an organization which aims to promote free trade. And the WTO has done much to persuade countries to drop trade barriers, which in turn has encouraged trade between nations where there previously was none. And this has been part and parcel of globalization. A third factor has been the formation of trading blocs without the help of the WTO. For example, the European Union has formed, so has NAFTA. And these trading blocs are areas where there are no trade barriers between countries, and this has also been a part of the reason why economies have moved closer together, become more closely integrated. A fourth reason is the lowering of transport costs. Transport costs are still there, of course. Goods have to be moved and it costs to move them. But as a fraction of the total production cost per unit, transport costs have dropped dramatically because of the increase in efficiency of modes of mass transport such as railways and shipping. This has also contributed to greater trade between nations and their closer economic integration, otherwise known as globalization. Also, information technology has become easier and faster, which has meant that communication can occur much more easily between countries. And this is the first step in trade, because, for example, people have to know which other countries they can use as sources of either finished goods or raw materials, and information technology helps them to discover this much more easily. So we've looked at a few factors, 5 factors, that have contributed to what we call globalization, the closer integration of the world economy. So what changes have happened as a result of globalization? What has globalization done to the world and for the world? Well, this leads us to a very tricky area because, of course, there are arguments that say that globalization has damaged the world, and other arguments to say that globalization has improved the world. So I'm going to leave the discussion of whether the effect of globalization has been positive or negative to another presentation, to another video. But in this presentation, I'm just going to point out one fact which has certainly resulted from globalization, which is that trade, or net exports, X minus M, is now a larger part of the GDP of many nations. So one thing that globalization has done, which is undeniable, is that it has increased the volume and value of trade as a fraction of the GDP of many nations. This is just a fact. We're not saying whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. So we're going to leave the good and possible bad aspects of globalization to another presentation, but we will say now that globalization has resulted in an increase in the proportion and importance of world trade as a fraction of world GDP.